Of course, since it's been unoccupied for some years, the owners may let it go for less. That fireplace doesn't draw well, and I can't answer for the plumbing.
It doesn't matter.
And I must tell you, there are noises.
Naturally, the sea and the wind.
No, Mrs. Room. Roman Fall is the boundary of this property. From the edge, the cliff falls 350 feet into the sea. The townsfolk don't come near Roman Fall, and there are no neighbors.
Good. My husband will be pleased.
Oh?
Mr. Roon insists on complete privacy.
Your husband insists on complete privacy?
If he were to die, I suppose you'd throw yourself on his funeral pyre like the dutiful wife you are.
Not so dutiful this last week.
Darling, I was a fool ever to let you slip out of my life. Suppose we'd never met again.
If I'd known how you felt, I'd never have slipped through. Were you in love with me way back then?
I even read your poetry.
That's real proof.
Oh, not a bit. It was good. Everybody at the university said you had a great talent. Whatever became of it?
I became Stanley Roon's wife. Who'd ever have noticed my little candle beside that dazzling light? Even you didn't notice me till I became Mrs. Roon.
Darling, I may have been a fool, but, well, even that doesn't excuse his behavior. Turning you into his secretary and housekeeper. And the screen behind which he lived.
What do you want me to do?
Tell him. Tell him that you're tired of being a great man's pale shadow. Tell him that you'd rather be an ordinary guy's friend and lover and wife. Tell him that we love each other.
I will, darling. Only, just give me a little more time.
No, tomorrow. As soon as he comes back.
I don't know.
I'll do it for you if you like. I don't mind.
No. No, that would humiliate him.
Of course. Always loyal, even now. You know, I think I approve of you.
May I? I'm Ford of the Telegraph. I wrote an article
Excuse me, Mr. Ford of the Telegraph, but you're sitting on my hat.
Oh, sorry. I wrote an article last Sunday, got very favorable notices, called Who is Stanley Roon?
I'm sorry, but
I know you don't give interviews about your husband, Mrs. Roon, but I've got some additional news about him. There's a rumor from Pakistan says he's living with a native tribe.
Excuse me, Mr. Ford, we were just leaving.
But, Mrs. Roon, this is news about your husband. Aren't you interested?
Mrs. Roon is not interested in your speculations, rumors, or lies, so please don't bother her anymore.
Of course not, if you say so. I notice you're a very close friend of Mrs. Roon's. I couldn't help noticing how close. Tell me, who are you?
If you care to read far enough back in your newspaper, you'll find my name mentioned. It's John Hamilton. As an undergraduate, I threw the javelin within a foot to the world's record. And though now I'm not in that same excellent condition, I promise you, if you come anywhere near Mrs. Roon again, I shall throw you far enough to break your neck.
Mr. Hamilton?
Oh, I suppose you want a story, too.
No, I just wanted to tell you one. Don't look now, but there's a man at that table there who's pretending to read a newspaper, but actually has been eavesdropping on you and Mrs. Roon.
Oh?
I saw him follow you in, and it's a safe assumption he's going to follow you out. I thought you ought to know.
Tell me, how did you know my name and Mrs. Roon?
Well, I have very sharp ears. That's the way I earn my living. My name is March, D3, Scotland Yard.
Colonel March? Well, I've always been a great admirer of your work.
Well, I've always been a great admirer of your husband's work. If I can be of any service to you, I'm staying at the hotel.
Oh, thank you.
Hey, what's the idea? What are you grabbing me for?
I didn't want to speak with my mouth full.
You must be out of your mind.
Hardly a novel accusation. My name is March, Scotland Yard.
Oh, a cop, eh?
In a manner of speaking. Won't you join me?
Now, look, I'm a very busy man.
Well, I could see how busy you are. You even work during lunch.
Cards on the table?
Cards on the table.
Cop, eh? Tell me, what do you get a week? How much do they pay you?
Oh, not nearly enough for a man of my talents.
So, you could use a little extra change.
Well, money's always useful.
In this case, money is no object. You can write your own ticket if you find me a fellow called Stanley Roon.
Oh, that's a very considerable undertaking.
Don't tell me. I've been running myself ragged for weeks following this Mrs. Roon. I figured she was the only one that could lead me to him, but no dice.
Why do you want to find Stanley Roon?
To give him $1 million.
Dollars? Sounds reasonable.
I'm Ben Crowder, Hemisphere Pictures.
American?
Well, the office is Hollywood. I'm international.
Ah, a promoter.
That's right. And right now, I'd like to promote Stanley Roon's books. If I could tie up the rights to those 5 books of his... Listen, have you any idea how many people have read those books? Do you know how many languages they're printed in?
Oh, many.
Yeah. What promotion? What publicity? Can you imagine? Pictures made from the books of Stanley Roon, the man nobody knows. Nobody knows who he is or where he is or what he is. English, French, Brazilian. He's the greatest mystery man of our day.
I thought Mrs. Roon acted for her husband in these matters. Did you take it up with her?
Did I? I phoned her till I was blue in the face. She says he says no. He doesn't want pictures made from his books.
Well, if he doesn't want pictures made from his books, that settles it, doesn't it?
You find me Stanley Roon. He'll sign.
What makes you so sure?
I have ways of persuading him.
Would one of them be this gun?
Now, like I say, I'm a very busy man.
Looks as though we'll both be busy.
What do you mean?
Well, you asked me to find Stanley Roon, didn't you?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Yeah, you find him. I'll make it worth your while.
Operator, I want the police. This is Mrs. Roon of Cliffside House. My husband's had an accident. The fence caved in at Roman Fall. He could swim. There might still be time. Hello, hello. Please come at once.
Very nicely done, Mrs. Roon. That's one of the best performances I've seen in a long time. And believe me, in my racket, I've seen plenty.
What are you doing here?
I still want your signature on that contract to the movie rights to your husband's books. Or should I say, your late husband's books?
Get out of here. I've told you before, those rights aren't for sale.
Now, look here, Mrs. Roon. I'm a very patient man. I think I've proved that already. But my patience is running thin. You sign these and I'll get out.
The police are coming here. I'll tell them you broke into the house.
And will you also tell them what I saw from that window shortly after I broke in? If you don't, and if you haven't signed these by the time they arrive, I'll have something very much more interesting to tell them.
You're blackmailing me.
Oh, come now, Mrs. Roon. Let's not call each other names, or I might think of a few. And that's no way to start a long and, I trust, profitable association.
You've no proof. It's my word against yours. And I very much doubt if your word is worth much.
You
should have destroyed the evidence, Mrs. Roon. Now, let's have no more of this nonsense. They'll be here in a minute. You going to sign these, or aren't you?
You'll need a witness on that contract.
I can take care of all that later. Come on. Sign here.
When do I receive my first payment?
As soon as my backers see this with your signature on it. Now, hurry.
I have a right to see my lawyer. We'll meet at his office tomorrow.
Mrs. Roon, if you don't sign this right now, you'll need a lawyer, all right, but it won't be for contracts. Now, come on. Come on.
Come in. I came as quickly as I could, March, but what's happened? I thought you were on holiday. So did I, but it seems death never takes a holiday. Writer, man of mystery, dies in fall. Stanley Roon, victim of tragic accident. An accident? Well, what's that got to do with us? You're not reading it correctly. Well, how does it read to you? Stanley Roon, victim of premeditated plot. Existence ended by party or parties unknown. Well, where does it say there? Page 3, column 4. Well, it only says that an international promoter is going to make movies out of Stanley Roon's books. And you say that means murder? Worse, wholesale slaughter. Crowder will murder Stanley Roon's stories. Well, you can't prevent it. It says here that he has a signed agreement with Mrs. Roon. Oh, but it also says that Crowder plans to leave England today. But we're not going to let him leave, my boy. We're going to detain him. In my department of Scotland Yard, we consider detaining a man a very serious matter. Well, the murder of Stanley Roon is no trifle. You're not going to charge Mr. Crowder with murder, surely? For the moment, it would be quite enough to charge him with carrying concealed weapons. How'd you like my new office?
Hello?
Mrs. Roon?
Yes, this is Mrs. Roon speaking.
Oh, this is Colonel March of Scotland Yard. I wanted to ask you for a description of your husband. What was the color of his hair?
Dark brown.
Was it straight?
Curly, well, wavy hair.
And his height and build?
Tall, over 6 feet. Athletic build.
I know this has been difficult for you, Mrs. Roon, and you've been most cooperative.
Well, I'll do everything I can to help.
Rather a youthful appearance, wouldn't you say?
Yes, rather youthful.
Did you have a photograph of him?
No, he never allowed himself to be photographed.
I see. Well, thank you very much, Mrs. Roon. Goodbye.
Goodbye.
What did March want?
Nothing much. Description of Stanley.
But I thought the local police were handling this. What does a Scotland Yard man have to do with it if it were just an accident?
What do you mean, John? If it were an accident?
Helen, did you discuss our plans with your husband?
No. I meant to tell him when he came back from his walk.
What was he doing out for a walk at that time of night?
How should I know? He was always a strange man.
Are you sure you didn't discuss it with him? I mean, was he upset when he went out?
Why don't you say what's on your mind, John? Did Stanley commit suicide because I told him I loved you and wanted a divorce? No, if that will relieve your conscience.
I am thinking about your conscience.
Don't think of it. Oh, darling. Don't ask me any more questions. Just love me. I need that now more than ever.
You are not telling me the truth, are you?
Stop acting like a prosecuting attorney.
But you must trust me. If you're in trouble, I'll do anything to help.
I'm not in trouble. The police believe my story. It's only you who go on acting as if I were... as if I'd killed him or something.
I didn't say that. It's just that it's happened too conveniently, when we wanted your freedom.
All right, then. I did away with my husband so that I could marry you. Now are you satisfied?
Helen.
Well, at least it proves to you that I love you.
I'm sorry I have to welsh on our little deal, Colonel. You can't expect me to pay you anything when I found Roon and you didn't.
When did you see him?
About 4 o'clock yesterday afternoon.
That would be about an hour or two before he fell off the cliff.
Yeah. Yeah, poor devil. He looked, distressed.
Evidently that contract he signed with you didn't cheer him up very much.
No. But it cheered me up plenty. I got his signature on that just in time.
I've always been curious about Roon being away from England so long. Often wondered what he looked like.
Oh, pretty much the way you'd expect. Bookish, stoop-shouldered, going bald.
Tall or short?
On the short side. Oh, I'm sorry to have to disappoint you fellas, but I gotta catch a plane in an hour.
Sorry, Mr. Crowder, but you're not taking a plane.
I thought you were working for me.
Oh, no, I'm working for Stanley Roon.
What are you talking about? He's dead.
That's why I'm working for him.
I'm sorry, Mr. Crowder, but we have information that you're carrying a concealed weapon.
So you know I've got a gun. Well, isn't that something? Maybe you'd like to read that to your friend.
This is an order march. A permit to carry a revolver.
Maybe you'd like to check the serial number.
There's been a mistake.
You're telling me?
No, I'm telling the inspector. I wasn't referring to this, Ames. I was referring to this other weapon hidden in the bag. I'll return this to you in a moment, Mr. Crowder. Well, there it is. You've made good use of it, haven't you?
Talk is cheap.
All right, get your coat and come along with me.
No, we don't want Mr. Crowder taken into custody. We just don't want him to leave the hotel until we tell him to. Thanks for letting me use it. Coming, Ames?
March.
You didn't knock, Ames.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I've got some very interesting news about our friend Crowder.
And I've got some very interesting news for you. There was no murder.
Curious. Very curious.
As you say. Well, you'll agree that there's no reason to detain Mr. Crowder any longer. I suppose I'd better apologize to him from us both.
Oh, I'd arrest him, I think, if I were you. You can always apologize if you have to.
Arrest him? Are you still insisting that Stanley Roon was murdered?
My dear fellow, I never insist. Come in. Oh, Professor Hamilton. This is Inspector Ames.
How do you do?
I think you'd better sit down, hadn't you?
Thank you.
Now then, Mr. Hamilton, I wonder if you'd repeat to Inspector Ames what you told me over the telephone.
There's no need. I've written it all out.
No one, so far as I know, suspected you of killing Stanley Roon. What made you decide to confess?
Well, I didn't want an innocent person to suffer.
You're referring to Mrs. Roon?
Yes, she knew I did it, of course, and would have been willing to take the blame rather than let it fall on me.
According to your statement, Professor, Roon attacked you when you told him that you were in love with his wife. Do you mean it was self-defense?
Well, that's what I hope to prove.
Well, the success of your plea of self-defense, of course, will depend upon the other witnesses. I've asked them to be at Cliffside House. You'll come with us, of course. The absence of a body makes things rather more difficult for the police, but on the other hand, it makes it easier for the one who did away with Stanley Roon. Wouldn't you say so, Mr. Crowder?
I wouldn't know.
Oh, that would be Ames.
Ah, why have I been invited down here, Inspector?
Oh,
Maybe I don't mind. Maybe there's another story.
And the other story that you wrote about Stanley Roon?
Oh, what about it?
You said you saw him die. You even described it as suicide. But as we now know that it was not suicide, that makes you an accessory to the murder.
Murder?
What murder? Mr. Hamilton has confessed that during the course of a violent struggle he had with the deceased, he was hurled through the fence and fell over the edge of the cliff.
For some reason, Mr. Ford, you neglected to mention that trifling fact in your eyewitness account of the tragedy.
Well, listen, fellas, I made my story up.
You did indeed. And you, Mr. Crowder, raised large sums of money on the basis of a contract allegedly signed by Stanley Roon. But if he had not plunged to his death, you'd have been jailed as a thief and a forger. So you see, you had a great deal to gain by his death.
You don't know what you're talking about. I've got a contract with a genuine signature.
Indeed? Whose genuine signature?
Stanley Roon's authorized agent. Her. Ask her.
Yes, I signed for my husband.
I see. Well, this is an authentic document, then. But I'm referring to another contract, a previous one that you used to raise money, to which you had forged Stanley Roon's name. But as this is an authentic contract, you're quite safe. Except this implement that was used to tear down the fence through which Roon plunged to his death. Now, if you won't say how it came into your possession, I will.
I found it.
I see. Now, Mrs. Roon, won't you tell us why you arranged your husband's death?
But this is ridiculous, Marge. I've already confessed.
John.
Would it be right to say that you broke down the fence with this weapon?
Yes.
And would it also be true to say that the man that you described to me over the telephone is still in existence? As a matter of fact, I made a small sketch. Would you say that I achieved a fair resemblance?
Wait a minute. That's a drawing of Hamilton. Well, where's the real Stanley Roon?
Oh, you mean the Stanley Roon that our friend Crowder described? The short, bald, rather bookish man who craved privacy? He doesn't exist. He never did exist.
What? Is this true, Ellie? There never was a Stanley Roon?
It's true, John. I lied. I invented Stanley Roon and pretended he was you.
But why?
Partly to get my books published and partly because, in some silly sort of way, it made me feel less alone. It was a silly, stupid thing to do.
Oh, Crowder, I wonder if I could trouble you for the contract that you extracted from Mrs. Roon. Under threat of blackmail. Thank you. What?
Thank you, Colonel March, for your understanding.
Oh, not at all. I hope you won't miss your husband too much, Mrs. Roon.
Mrs. Hamilton.
Of course.
Thank you.